Welcome to ISIHO 442, Study Session 12, Decision Theory 1. Introduction. In this lecture and the next, we shall examine decision theory or analysis, which is a systematic method of strategy where a decision maker is faced with several alternatives and an uncertain or risking pattern of future events. In this lecture, we treat decision under uncertainty while we postpone the treatment of decision under risk to the next lecture. Objective. At the end of this lecture, you should be able to understand the decision criterion for analyzing decision under uncertainty. A. Nature of decision making. Decision making can be described as the act of selecting a preferred course of action among alternatives. The act of decision making enters into almost all of a manager's activities. Managers must reach decisions about objectives and plans for their organizational units. They must decide how to direct, how to organize, how to control. They must not only make many decisions, but also guard subordinates in reaching decisions of their own. Businesses and other organizations survive by making and implementing enough of the right decisions. They fail either because they make the right decisions but are unsuccessful in implementing them, or because they make wrong decisions and succeed in implementing them. Decisions range from simple judgments to complex analysis, which can also involve judgment. Judgments typically incorporate basic knowledge and experience that enable us to blend objective and subjective data to arrive at a choice. Quantitative methods of analysis add to the objectivity of decisions. The appropriate type of analysis to consider for a particular decision depends on the following: the significance and long-lasting of the decision. For example, a planned investment may deserve more thorough analysis than a short-term decision to buy chicken for New Year Eve. The time availability and the cost of analysis. For example, there must be adequate time to study the complete financial implications of a project proposal. The degree of complexity of the decision. Complexity increases when many variables are involved. The variables are highly interdependent or sequentially related. The data describing the variables are incomplete or uncertain. The types of decisions people make depend on how much knowledge or information they have about the problem scenario. Based on this, there are three decision-making environments. Decision-making under certainty. This is when decision makers know for sure, that is, with certainty, the outcome or consequence of every decision alternative. Naturally, they will select the alternative that will result in the best outcome. Linear programming is an example of decision modeling techniques suited for decision making under certainty. Decision making under uncertainty. This is when the decision maker has no information at all about the various outcomes or states of nature that he or she does not know the probabilities of the various future outcomes. Decision making under risk. This is when decision maker has some knowledge regarding the probability of occurrence of each outcome or state of nature. For example, the probability of rolling a 5 on a die is 1/6. In decision making under risk, the decision maker attempts to identify the alternative that optimizes his or her expected profit or cost. B. Framework for decision making. An analytical and scientific framework for decision implies several systematic steps as explained below. Not all managers follow this formal process, nor all decisions necessitate it. Regardless of the situation, experience and good judgment are always important ingredients in decision making. The steps for scientific decision making are as follows. 1. Define the problem and its parameters, relevant variables. 2. Establish the decision criteria, objectives to reflect the goals and purpose of the work efforts. 3. Formulation of a model relating the parameters to the criteria. Models can be A. Verbal, words and descriptions. B. Physical, modified scale, three-dimensional representations of other objects. C. Schematic, diagrams and charts, graphs and maps. D. Mathematical, equations and numbers. Mathematical models are most useful for understanding complex business problems. 4. Generate alternatives by varying the values of the parameters. A decision alternative is a course of action or a strategy that can be chosen by the decision maker. 5. Evaluate the alternatives and select the alternative that best satisfies the criteria. All possibilities must be considered. The results may be undesirable. Outcomes over which the decision maker has little or no control are called states of nature. 6. Implement the decision and monitor the results. To illustrate the decision-making process, assume Maxwell is the founder and president of Maxwell Consult, a profitable firm located in Lagos, Nigeria. Maxwell identifies its problem as follows. Whether to expand its product line by manufacturing and marketing a new product, Maxwell flour. Maxwell decides its alternatives are to construct 1. A large plant to manufacture the Maxwell flour. 2. A small plant to manufacture the Maxwell flour. 3. No plant at all. That is, he has the option of not developing the new product line. One of the biggest mistakes that decision makers make is to leave out some important decision alternatives like no plant at all. Although a particular alternative may seem to be inappropriate or of little value initially, it may turn out to be the best choice later. Maxwell determines there are only two possible outcomes. 1. The market for Maxwell flour could be favorable, meaning that there is a high demand for the product. 2. The market for Maxwell flour could be unfavorable, meaning that there is a low demand. A common mistake is to forget about some of the possible outcomes. Optimistic decision makers tend to ignore bad outcomes, whereas pessimistic decision makers tend to ignore a favorable outcome. We have to consider all possibilities. Outcomes over which the decision maker has little or no control are called states of nature. Maxwell's next step is to express the payoff resulting from each possible combination of alternatives and outcomes. Simply, a payoff is the outcome of the decision. Since he wants to maximize his profit in this case, he can use profit to evaluate each consequence. We call such payoffs or profit conditional values. Maxwell has already evaluated the potential monthly profit associated with the various combinations of alternatives and outcomes. With the favorable market, he thinks a large facility would result in a net profit of 200,000 naira to his firm. This 200,000 naira is a conditional value because Maxwell's receiving the money is conditional upon both his building a large facility and having a good market. The conditional value if the market is unfavorable would be a net loss of 180,000 naira. A small plant would result in a net profit of 100,000 naira in a favorable market, but a net work of 20,000 naira would occur if the markets were unfavorable. Finally, doing nothing would result in 0 naira profit in either market. The easiest way to present these values is by constructing a decision table called payoff table. A payoff table is a means of organizing and illustrating the payoffs from different situations given various states of nature. Each decision as alternative will result in an outcome or payoff for each state of nature that will occur in the future. Payoff table for Maxwell. Maxwell has to select a decision model and apply it to the data to help to make decision. The type of decision model available for selection depends on the environment in which we are operating and the amount of uncertainty and risk involved. C. Principles for decision making under uncertainty. The various principles or decision rules for decision making under uncertainty are explained below. Maximax or minimum principle. The Maximax criterion selects the alternative that maximizes the maximum payoff or consequence over all alternatives. That is, the decision is selected that will result in the maximum of the maximum payoffs. This is how the criterion derives its name, the maximum of maxima. The Maximax criterion is very optimistic. The decision maker assumes that the most favorable state of nature for each decision alternative will occur. In terms of cost, the minimum cost for each alternative is considered and you select the alternative which minimizes the minimum, that is, minimum. Maximum or minimax principle. The maximum criterion finds the alternative that maximizes the minimum payoff or consequence over all alternatives. That is, the decision maker selects the decision that will reflect the maximum of the minimum payoffs. The maximum criterion is pessimistic. The decision maker assumes that the minimum payoff will occur. When dealing with the cost, you consider the maximum cost associated with each alternative and select the alternative which minimizes the maximal cost, minimax. Equally likely, equal likelihood, or Laplace principle. The equally likely, also called Laplace, criterion finds the decision alternative with the highest average payoff. That is, the equally likely criterion weights each state of nature equally, thus assuming that the states of nature are equally likely to occur. If the payoffs are in terms of cost, we choose the strategy with the lowest average cost. Principle of realism, Unwick's criterion. A compromise between the maximax and maximum criteria. With the Unwick's criterion, the decision payoffs are weighted by a coefficient of optimism, a measure of the decision maker's optimism. The coefficient of optimism defined as A, is between 0 and 1. That is 0 less than A less than 1.0. If A equals to 1.0, the decision maker is completely optimistic. If A equals to 0, the decision maker is completely pessimistic. Given this definition, 1 minus A is the coefficient of pessimism. The advantage of this approach is that it allows the decision maker to build impersonal feelings about relative optimism and pessimism. The rule is to select maximum of A, maximum payoff for an alternative, plus 1 minus A, minimum payoff for an alternative. And for cost, you select minimum of A, minimum cost for an alternative, plus 1 minus A, maximum cost for an alternative. Minimax regret criterion. This criterion is based on opportunity loss. Opportunity loss, also called regret, is the difference between the optimal payoff and the actual payoff received. In other words, it's the amount lost by not picking the best alternative. Minimax regret finds the alternative that minimizes the maximum opportunity loss within each alternative. D. Example 1. Consider a TV and DVD manufacturing company that is considering several alternative methods of expanding its production to accommodate increasing demand for its products. Company planners indicate that there are only 4 viable options to the company. 1. Expand the present plant. 2. Build a new plant. 3. Subcontract out extra production to TV and DVD manufacturers. 4. Do nothing at all. Having identified all the viable alternatives, the decision maker must now list the future events that may occur. Generally, decision makers can identify most future events than can occur. The difficulty is identifying which particular event will occur. These future events, not under the control of the decision maker, are called, as mentioned before, states of nature. In this case, our TV and DVD manufacturer, the greatest uncertainty attaches to future demand for the product. The future events relating to demand are listed as 1. High demand resulting from high product acceptance. 2. Moderate demand resulting from reasonable product acceptance but heavy competitive response. 3. Low demand resulting from low product acceptance. 4. Failure, no product acceptance. In defining this state of nature, it will be quite usual for the decision maker to attach a money unit or unit volume to each of the 4 possible events outcomes to define them more accurately. Assume the decision maker constructs a payoff table of the extra payoffs expressed in profit earned over the next 5 years, which would result from each possible combination of decision, alternative, and state of nature as follows. As a special consultant, you are to help the manufacturer to determine the optimal action using 1. Maximus criterion, 2. Maximum principle, 3. The Laplace principle, 4. The Unwicks principle. Assume A equals to 0.7. 5. Minimax regret criterion. E. Solution 1. If the decision maker wants to use Maximus criterion, he first selects the maximum payoff possible for each decision alternative, then chooses the alternative that provides him with the maximum payoff within this group. The alternative within this group which provides the maximum payoff is billed with an associated extra payoff over 5 years, 700,000 naira. 2. Maximum principle. If the decision maker tries to maximize its minimum possible payoffs, he begins by first listing the minimum payoff that is possible for each decision alternative. The decision alternative in this criterion is the alternative do nothing at all. 3. The Laplace principle. This requires average payoff, which is simply the sum of all payoffs for an alternative divided by the number of outcomes. We then pick the alternative with the maximum average payoff. The Laplace approach assumes that all probabilities of occurrence for the states of nature are equal. That is, each state of nature is equally likely. For equally likely criterion, the choice is to subcontract with an associated extra payoff over 5 years of 85,000 naira. 4. The Ulrich's principle. If we assume the decision maker of the complaint feels fairly optimistic and assigns a value of 0.7 to A, the advantage of using this criterion of realism is that the decision maker is able to introduce his own personal feelings of relative optimism or pessimism into the decision process. The measure of realism, Ulrich's criterion, gives to build a new plant as A. The optimum decision. 5. Minimax regret criterion. The table below shows the regret associated with all combinations of decision alternative and state of nature. These regret values are obtained by subtracting every entry in the payoff table from the largest entry in its column. Applying the minimax regret criterion requires the decision maker to indicate the maximum regret for each decision alternative. He then chooses the minimum of the regret values. The optimal decision is to subcontract with the payoff of 400,000 naira. Summary. Businesses and other organizations survive by making and implementing enough of the right decisions. Decisions analysis range from simple judgment to complex analysis and can be classified into decision making under certainty, decision making under uncertainty, and decision making under risk. For decision making under uncertainty, the solution principles include maximus or minimum principle, maximum or minimax principle, equally likely, equal likelihood, or Laplace principle, principle of realism, Ulrich's criterion, and minimax regret criterion. End of study session 12. Thanks for listening.